It's often said that a computer system is composed of three stages: the input, the processing, and the output. So the input is collecting the data, the information required for the computer program. The processing is doing something with it, the calculations, sorting, etc. And then the output is displaying the results of that in a form that the user can understand. And each of those stages is important in its own right, but the input and the output are possibly more important, because if you haven't got any new information to operate on, then your program's going to do exactly the same thing every time. And if you can't see the results, then there's not really any point in doing that processing. So quite often when you learn to program, the first things you look at are input and output, and usually the first thing you do is actually output. So you might want to print your name on the screen, or you might want to print something like hello world. So we're looking here at console applications. Console applications are text-based applications, the sort of thing you might be creating for GCSE non-examined assessment in the UK. So we're going to output our text to something called the console window. So if we type in console to Visual Studio, it'll autocomplete, and then we're going to say dot, full stop, and then we're going to say write. So I'm going to type the first few letters, and that's giving me a choice of write or write line. So I'm going to show you what both of those do and what the difference is. So using Visual Studio, it's probably easier not to take your hand off the keyboard if you're typing, so I'm going to use the down arrow to select write line, and I'm going to press the tab key to put that into my code. So this is the kind of general form of Visual Basic keywords, or Visual Basic kind of instructions. We have some sort of object, in this case the console window, and then a full stop, and then something we want to do to that thing, or a property. So in this case it's an action. We're going to write a line of text to the console window. So we need some brackets, and there's a variety of different things that we can display in the console window. So we can display text. So hello world is traditionally the first kind of thing you would do in a new programming language. So if we want to display text, we need to put it in speech marks. And we can also display numbers. So if I just, I could have copied and pasted that, but there we go. So I can display numbers. I don't need the speech marks for numbers. I can also display things like the result of calculations. So if I do this, I can say 2 plus 3, for example, and let's see what that does. So if I use the start button, it will run my program, but because there's nothing to pause that program, it'll run it, it'll kind of fall off the end, it'll stop, and then the window will disappear, and we won't be able to see what's happened. So I'm going to use Control and F5 to run this, because then it pauses at the end. So Control F5, it'll compile my program to begin with into an executable form, and then it'll display the results. So if I just move that over and compare it with the code, so I've printed hello world, I've printed 1, 2, 3, and then I've printed 2 plus 3, which has given me the result 5. So notice that each thing I've printed has appeared on a new line. So write line prints some text, and it moves on to the next line. So I'm going to press any key there and get rid of that. So if I were to get rid of the line, so remember the other option was console.write, then I had to run that program again. Notice the difference is the text all appears on one line. So it's printed hello world, it's printed 1, 2, 3, it's printed 5, but all together on one line. And then this press any key to continue isn't part of my program, it's just the computer asking, kind of pausing and asking when I'm ready to continue. So that's the difference between write and write line. Why wouldn't you want to start a new line? Well, sometimes you might be constructing a kind of sentence and you need to calculate or process the different parts of that. So you could print the fixed text bits at the start, and then you could add calculated values to that. Or sometimes you might want to do something like this. So we can also ask questions. So if I want to ask a question, I need to store the answer. So we'll have a look at a bit more about storing information in a later video, but I'm going to use something called a variable. And in Visual Basic, we need to declare variables before we use them. So we declare them using the dim command, and I'm going to say dim name as string. So basically, that means I'm going to use a variable called name, and it's going to be a string. So a string is a string of characters, i.e. some text. And what we can do is we can say name equals console So we're going to collect the information. We're going to input the information from the console as well as using it to display the results. Dot. And if we want to get information in, we're reading it. And notice there's 3 choices for this. So we had write and write line for output. For inputting, we've got read, read key, and read line. So if I wanted to read in a whole piece of text, so name, for example, I'm going to use read line. I'll show you what the other 2 do in a minute. And then open and close brackets like this. Now, unlike some other programming languages like Python, for example, asking the question doesn't actually display the text. So what I might want to do is something like this. I might want to have a question. I might want to use console.write to print the question. Oops. And if I use write, then that means where the user types in their answer will be on the same line of the program. So the answer will appear next to the question. So you might want to use that to kind of refine the layout of your program, decide whether you're going to use write or write line. And then what we're going to do with that, well, I said we could print stuff, so we could do calculations. So I did 1 plus 2 or 2 plus 3 to get the answer 5. If I do this, if I say console.writeLine, and then I'm going to say just hello. Now, computers aren't clever. They don't know what you want. They don't know the rules of grammar. So if I want a space in there, I need to explicitly put it in there. So I'm going to say hello, and then I'm going to say ampersand. Now, ampersand is the Visual Basic way of joining text together. That's called concatenation in programming terms. So I'm going to say hello plus, effectively, name. So what that's going to do is that's going to display the text, what is your name? It's going to ask the user for some input and store that in this variable called name, and then it's going to say hello plus name. So if I run this now, what's it going to do? So it's going to say, what is my name? My name's Andrew, and it's going to say hello Andrew, and then it's going to say press any key to continue. So we've got some input there and we've outputted it. So what about if we want to output more than one thing? Well, let's just have a look at this combination of text first. So that's one way to do it. Sometimes some people prefer to do it this way. So if you've ever done a mail merge, you'll be familiar with this idea of kind of placeholders in your text where you want to insert pieces of information. So in Visual Basic, they're indicated by the curly brackets and a number. So you have to start with 0 and you have to go up in steps of 1. So that indicates the placeholder for the first variable, if you like, the 0th variable. We start counting at 0 a lot in programming, which takes a bit of getting used to, but you will get used to it. So I'm going to say that's my sentence that I want to output, and this is the information that's going to go into it. So hello blank, and then in that blank I want the name. So I'm going to run this program now just to show that it behaves in exactly the same way. So Control 5, what's my name? So it's going to say hello Dave. So that's particularly useful when you want to create a sort of sentence with more than one unknown piece of text in there. So at the moment, that's not a lot easier than just saying hello ampersand name. But if you do something like this, so if I'll need a second variable now, so I'll say age as integer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's just copy that. So we'll say, how old are you? And then what we'll say is age equals console dot read line. And then here we're going to say hello blank. You don't look. And this time we're going to have a second thing in there. So I need to use 1. So this is our kind of second placeholder, and so I need to include the thing in there. So these numbers, they don't need to be in order, so I could have 1 first and 0 second, but I do need to start at 0 and count upwards, and the order of the variables afterwards is in the same order. So the first one will be 0, the second one will be 1, etc. So now if I run this, Control F5, no, not that, Control F5, it'll ask me what's my name, so I'll say Andrew. It'll say, how old are you? I'll say 21. It'll say, hello Andrew, you don't look 21. So I've combined two pieces of information into a kind of single sentence, and I think that's probably a slightly clearer way to do that rather than using lots of ampersands. What we can also do is, so some programming languages such as Python and JavaScript have a symbol or a kind of character that you can insert into an output if you want to start a new line. So imagine I wanted hello and you don't look 21 to be on separate lines. I could just use two lots of write or write line in this case. But what I could also do is this. So I'm going to insert, so I'm going to use a capital Y because we're starting a new line, and I'll put a full stop in there as well. I'm going to insert a third thing here, and so that'll be 2 because I've used 0 and 1. Notice that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that 2's before 1 as long as I get the stuff in the right order here. So what am I going to insert there? So I'm going to insert the symbol to start a new line, or the characters to start a new line. Now in Windows and in Visual Basic, it's not a single character. What I need is a carriage return and a line feed. Now I happen to know from my theory work that I've done on representing characters as numbers, there's this thing called Ascii codes which represent each character, each symbol as a number. So capital A is 65, capital B is 66, etc. And then 97 is lowercase a. So I also happen to know that character 13 is a carriage return and character 10 is a line feed. And Windows requires both of those to start a new line, so it's going to insert those at 2. So if I run that now, what's your name, Andrew? How old are you? 21. And now it's created the output on 2 different lines. What I can also do is, I happen to know that an easier way to do this is to use Visual Basic constants. So Visual Basic's got lots of constants in it. You might have learnt about constants in the theory side. They're named values, and they're quite good for things like pi, so you don't have to keep typing in 3.14 blah 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 every time you want to do a calculation. But certain other things also have constants that you can use, and there's a constant called VBCRLF, so Visual Basic carriage return line feed, which you can use instead of having to remember that it's a combination of character 10 and character 13. So now if I run this, it'll do the same thing, hopefully. So I'll say my name's Dave and I'm 42, and it'll say, hello Dave, you don't look 42. So that is a little bit of output, a little bit of manipulation. We'll maybe come across more advanced uses of text manipulation and formatting later in the course. So we've looked at read. So we said there were other types of input. So when I did console.read, there were 3, weren't there? There was so we've looked at read line. That's to input a string. What read does is it reads in a single character. So obviously I can't have a name in a single character, but we could say press a key. Okay, and what I'm going to call that is key. So I need to change that key. Now what I happen to know this does, if I run that now, I'd get an error because I haven't declared what key is, but I happen to know that key actually returns a number. So we can test that, or we can print it. So if I do console.writeLine and then put u pressed and then key. So let's see what this does. So in fact, I'm going to do write line. So when it says press any key to continue, that will be on the line below, and it'll be a bit easier to read. So Control F5 to run that. It'll say press a key. I'll press a key. I'll say A, and it says you pressed 65. And that's because what it inputs is the ASCII code. What it does is it converts the user's input into an ASCII code, but I can convert that back into a symbol by using the CHR command. There'll be more on this in the text manipulation videos, so I'll just show you what this does. And in fact, yeah, that's okay. I was going to put some extra punctuation in there, but doesn't really need it, I don't think. So Control F5. So press a key. Now this time I'm going to put just more than one thing in there. So just to show you what happens. So I've put 3 characters in there, 3 letters, A, B, C. Notice that it says you pressed A. One thing I also didn't point out there, which I should have done, is that I'm typing a letter, but I have to press the Enter key afterwards. So it's only accepting the first of the letters. If when I typed A, B, C, it only accepted A. So it behaves a little bit like readline, except it only looks at the first character of what you've entered. So you might have also noticed the third option was read key. Now read key, and what it does is it reads a single character, except you don't have to press enter. So that's quite nice for like menu options. So if you say, you know, press A to do this, B to do that, C to do the other, the user only has to press a single key. They don't have to press one thing and then press enter. And that means you're guaranteed to have a single character as your input. You also get that benefit with read, of course. So if you wanted to say, you know, press Y to continue or N to stop, you only have to check that it's the right character. You don't have to worry about the length of it or anything. Now, the slightly strange thing about this is what key then becomes, what gets saved is something called console key info. So don't worry too much about this. Console key info. And what that is, that's a whole kind of collection of information about the key that's being pressed. So it collects that information, and then we can pick out various different bits. So if I want to print, well, let's have a look. So I'm going to do console dot write line. What we're going to so let's have some text. Let's have some preamble. So you pressed, and then we want to display the key. So the Visual Studio kind of auto completion thing also works with things called like objects. So if I do plus, if I type in key, notice that variables come up in the list, but then if I put a dot after there, these are all the things. So the things with the spanner are properties of key, and the things with the cube are things that I can do to key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to key char. Well, in fact, if I move the pointer over it, it tells me, it says gets the character represented by that object, or if I do that, it says gets the console key. So what I actually want is the character, isn't it? Modifiers are things like, you know, if I want to do other calculations on there, so they might be useful if I wanted to do some encryption or something like that. But let's go to key char, which is just the actual character. So now, if I run this, and what we'll see is it'll ask me for a character, or ask me to press a key. I'm going to press Q, and it says you pressed Q. So I didn't have to press enter then. So let's just try that again. So even though that's interesting, even though it's I've used write line, it hasn't started a new line. So let's just run that again. So you might hear just a single key click. So I'm going to press K, and straight away I didn't have to press enter afterwards. It just inputted a single letter. That could be useful, as I said, for things like menu options, or press a particular key to carry on. It can also be useful if you want to process input kind of a text at a time, a letter at a time as somebody's typing. So obviously each time they press that key, it will accept that, and you can process it and then move on to ask for the next one. So it might be useful for that as well. So what we've looked at is, in this video, we've looked at using the console to input and output. So console.write prints some text on the screen. Console.writeLine prints text and starts a new line. And then we can also input through the console. So we've got read line to input all of the text until the user presses enter. So that's useful for longer things like names. We've got console.read to input a single character, but the user does need to press enter, and what you get is the Ascii code. And then we've also got read key, which inputs this kind of console key info object, it's called, and we can inspect various different aspects of that, including the actual character. The one thing that also needed to look at, so if you've come from another language such as Python, you'll be aware that you can sometimes multiply text. So going back to the more kind of simplistic examples, we said you could do this sort of thing. So you can do console.writeLine A plus B. But what about if I wanted to create a string of things? What about if I wanted to do something like this? Imagine I wanted to ask somebody there what their name was. So dim name as string. We're going to say name equals console dot. So that's read line because I want the whole thing. I suppose we need to ask them a question first. So console dot write. What is your name? And then what we're going to do is we're going to output their name. So we're going to console.writeLine, but we're going to underline it. Okay, so we're going to output their name, so name, and then we're going to underline it. So in fact, what we'll do is we use a string. So we'll say so we're going to have their name. If I can type it properly, there we go. So the name will have their the new line character, and then we'll have some underlining. So that's three things. So the first one is their name. The second one is that new line character. So VBCRLF, there we go. And then the third thing is some sort of underlining. Now we've only got a simple kind of text output, but we can underline it by using something like equal signs underneath. But how many of those do we need? We don't know how many of those we need. We can't say 6 because their name might not have 6 letters. So what we can do, there's a command called struct. So string duplicate, and then what we do is we tell it how many we want, and then what we want. So what that would give me is 6 equal signs, basically. So that's the same as equals times 6 in Python, for example. But I don't want 6 there, do I? What I want is the length of the name. So I can create a number of equal signs equal to the length of the name, and that will behave as though I've kind of underlined my name. So now I'm going to run that, and I'm going to say what's my name. So my name is Andrew, and I get an equal sign for each letter in my name. What about if I have a shorter name? So Milo, for example, that's only a 4-letter name, and it's given me 4 equals characters to underline it. And what about if I've got a longer name? So what would be a longer name? Elizabeth. And that works as well. So I can, if I want to repeat a number of characters, I can do that. In fact, I could repeat anything I liked in there as well. So I could repeat a word. So if I wanted the word hello 10 times, for example, I could do that.